Welcome to another episode of Mountain Dew and Donuts with Mr. G on as we read The Broken Blade. There. I hope you heard that. I have other talents too, and but just making a straw sound like a whistle is one of them. All right, let's read about what happened to Dad's thumb yesterday and see if maybe he's going to use that thumb as an extra finger, something to grab things with, an extra thumb to hold down papers when he's correcting stuff, an extra thumb when he's hitting nails into wood, just to hold down that nail. Let's see what happens. Unless that thumb is gone. Excuse me. Kind of fighting a little bit of a little cold. So, all right. On Monday morning, Pierre visited with his dad before he left for school. Pierre sat down carefully beside him. You know, Pierre said, this wouldn't have happened if I'd been, and Father interrupted him. It's not your fault that I chopped off my thumb. That's horrible, he said, scowling at the heavy bandage in disgust. Short, dark, and always energetic, Father was never one to hide his feelings. His voice resounded with conviction, the same voice that loved to sing and tell stories. Pierre stared at the wrapped up thumb, imagining the stub in its stitched flap of skin. What he wanted to say was, tell me the truth, Dad. Was my laziness the thing that crippled you? Oh, man. This is horrible. You're not going to hear this Hivernant complain about anything but his own clumsiness. Pierre's dad continued. Why, I was the one wielding the axe when I was half your size. But if I'd... Pierre, I'm going to hear none of that. And I'm going to thank you not to manufacture excuses for me. I'm the one who messed up. I'm old enough to know the difference between a stick of wood and my thumb. As Pierre left the bedroom, he heard the nervous whispers of his mom and sister. He knew what they were talking about. His dad was scheduled to sign engagement papers with the Northwest Company this very week. Now, no one knows what's going to happen. Like most men of Lachine, Canada, Pierre's dad was a voyager who freighted goods from Montreal to Grand Portage. Grand Portage, by the way, is up in Minnesota. He knew the Ottawa River system and the Great Lakes as well as anybody alive, and the canoes he guided were famous because they were fast. Like me, fast. If Dad couldn't sign on, Camille, who was already 17, could work as a maid or housekeeper to help the family survive. They might manage if Mommy could do the same, but she needed to take care of Pierre's baby sister, Claire. When Pierre sat down to breakfast, Camille asked, Are you all right? He ignored her, hating the way she babied him lately. I'm sorry, are you all right? He ignored her, hating the way she babied him lately. Since she'd gotten an engagement ring last Christmas from a Montreal boy, it was as if he had two mothers. She was always ordering him around. And to make matters worse, she had a loud voice like Dad's. Even a casual comment sounded bossy. Pierre couldn't wait until she married next summer and moved into a house of her own. Well, that sounds interesting. Family love, right? Everybody likes each other. As he ate, Pierre watched little Claire tug at Camille's hair ribbon. Though Claire had spent the first 6 months of her life crying, she was smiling a lot lately. That's funny. I spent the first 6 months of my life crying. Last week, she even had pointed at Pierre and said, "Ba," a word he proudly insisted meant brother. If this baby had to go hungry because of him, Pierre would never forgive himself. But what could he do? After breakfast, Pierre left for school. Pierre's mom insisted he attend school, even though most of his friends had left the schoolroom and gone to work. Like Daddy Dad, Mommy Mom wasn't shy about her opinions. She always told her son that he would be a great man someday. She hoped he would become a judge, a merchant, or even a priest. But Pierre, he didn't want to look that far ahead. School had always been easy for Pierre, but now he was 13 and the oldest boy. He was still enrolled at school, and he was bored. Sister Marguerite tried to make things more interesting by giving him special assignments and having him tutor the younger students. But tutoring, that was dull compared to the stories his working friends told of their lives as canoemen, lumberjacks, and apprentice tradesmen. He was tired of being a mere schoolboy when everyone else had entered the real world. They were driving wagons, piloting riverboats, and voyaging in canoes, while he was stuck memorizing Latin verbs. There's nothing wrong with studying Latin verbs, is there? Especially if you're 13. That sounds like fun. This morning, though he told no one of his plan, he walked straight past his school to the waterfront district and the main depot of the Northwest Company. The riverbank was crowded with dozens of men. The voyageurs were dressed in red caps, short shirts tied with bright sashes, breechclouts, deerskin leggings, and moccasins. They were all busy packing trade goods and working on their canoes. Pierre felt nervous and out of place. He'd never stayed away from school before. He never skipped before, and he was worried about what his mommy would think. During breakfast, when he planned this trip in his mind, he thought it'd be easy to find a company clerk and one of his dad's friends, but he had no idea where to begin in this maze of humanity. He walked over to a fellow who was holding a torch in one hand and dripping a ball of pitch onto the seams of a canoe. Pierre tapped him on the shoulder. "Excuse me, sir? Could..." And the man stood up and growled, "What do you want with Bellegarde?" Pierre quickly drew back. This was the ugliest man he'd ever seen. This is the ugliest man he'd ever seen. His hair was thin, scraggly, one of his earlobes was missing, and the left side of his face was pushed towards the center. There were scars along his cheek. His nose had this stark relief against his face that was all suntanned. I was looking. Could you tell me? The fumes from the torch burned Pierre's eyes and he coughed. The voyager threw back his head and laughed. I'm sorry, that might be the wrong kind of laugh. One tooth was missing. That's great. Not here. You used to be prettier than Andre Bellegarde? You're used to prettier men than Andre Bellegarde, but I'll tell you, I'm the best looking fellow who's ever wrestled a grizzly bear and lost. One swipe to the head. Oh, that's nice. He pointed to the jagged scars with the warm pitch block in his hand. And one swipe to the head is what made this mess. Save your pity for the dead, boy. Bellegarde spat onto the sand at Pierre's feet. Besides, that bear's worse off than I am right now. He rattled the bear claw necklace that hung down the front of his leather shirt. Don't never be sorry for no man that's still alive. Okay. Pierre stared at the bear claws as huge as a man's finger, and his eyes widened. Please, I'm looking for your brigade chief. And I would have added to that, I didn't need to hear your life story. I'm looking for your brigade chief. McKay, the man pointing with his torch towards the log storehouse just up the riverbank. McKay. For a moment, Pierre thought about heading back to school. He was used to taking things slowly and considered every option, but he could tell that these men plunged headlong into their work. As he walked cautiously up the bank, men hurried by on all sides. They carried bundles of trade goods and laughed and whistled. One man with a powder keg on each shoulder yelled, "Step aside, boy. These casks got more bite than you'd care to handle." That was the company his father kept? Wow, this is weird. Heavy muscled people with shoulders, each person carrying two 90-pound bales of cargo on his back. A few swaggering fellows hauled 3 parcels without complaint. This is who Dad hung out with? As Pierre studied the men, he recalled the first time his dad brought him down to the landing. He was 7 or 8 years old, one of the last brigades of the season, and it was just arriving. Dad hoisted him on his shoulders so he could see over the gathering crowd. Pierre counted 24 canoes. It was the biggest brigade of the year. Then he whispered, "There's more than $1 million worth of pelts in those canoes. Not bad for a single season of the fur trade. With the Ojibwe, eh?" $1 million, Pierre repeated. "Yeah," Father nodded. "And a lot of it was paddled and portaged more than 1,000 miles from Grand Portage, just so gentlemen can wear beaver pelt hats." Uh-oh, there goes my light. I think that means that my first part of Chapter 2 is over. All right, I will continue on next time.